Welcome back to Quantum Conversations. My name is Sarah, and today my co host Carrie Bennett and I are so excited that you're here because we're going to talk about these complex topics in circadian biology and quantum biology and make them accessible to the everyday person. So you're in for a real treat, and we're so excited to have you here. I want to take a moment to ask you, if you're listening over on Apple or Spotify, to leave the show a review to help get it out to more people. And if you're over on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and leave us a comment or a like underneath this video to, again, help get this show out to more and more people. Please check out also the show notes if you're on audio only or if you're on video. We have them under both all of my free resources and all of Carrie's free resources. We have co-taught a course called Quantum Fertility together and actually just wrapped up the Health Transformation Summit. We will be doing another one in a few months. So we have a lot of projects we're working on together, and we have a lot of free resources for you in the show notes that we would love you to check out if some of these topics in the show are interesting to you and you want to join either one of our communities or dive deeper, get some free resources, or even take a course. Make sure to check those out. Thank you again for listening or watching, whichever one you're doing. And let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. Hello, welcome back to Quantum Conversations. We are so excited to have you here. And today we want to talk about, is there a replacement for sunlight? So the SAD light boxes, the sun lamps like Spurty or tanning beds,
red light therapy panels, bulbs, right? Any bulbs out there?
Light bulbs. Yeah, let's talk about it. So, yeah.
I think we first need to frame this with understanding some aspects of sunlight so that we know what we're kind of going to be comparing these other things to. And I would say, first and foremost, we have to recognize that sunlight changes all the time. And it changes not only from sunrise to solar noon to sunset, but it also changes on a seasonal basis when we have longer days versus shorter days. And so if I'm not just viewing the colors of light. I'm viewing how they are shifting and changing in relationship to each other throughout the day as providing information to my body for doing things like in the morning, kickstarting some circadian signaling pathways like the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis or thyroid axis or ovarian axis, right? We're not just looking at the color being there. It would be blue in that instance. We're looking at the fact that there was no blue prior to sunrise to now all of a sudden blue is here, right? So that's a start of the day. And we get more and more
gradual turning on, right?
Exactly.
It's not just like you turn on a light and it's there. It's like you're out and it's slowly coming into you.
Gradual. It's this gradual transition. And so blue light is one of those wavelengths that we key in on. And it's changes all throughout the course of a day. That one in particular signals time. That's circadian rhythm signaling. And so the changing blue is very important for our body to know what time of day it is. And then when it's gone in the evening, to know what time that it's nighttime. We talked about that a decent amount, but then there's other colors, right? There's also ultraviolet light, which isn't present all the time. It appears in layers as well. There's a period before there's any ultraviolet light. And then as soon as the sun reaches, exactly. As soon as the sun reaches a certain height above the horizon, which is technically 10 degrees above the horizon, then ultraviolet A appears and starts to get gradually greater in intensity, right? So then there's this transition of more and more ultraviolet A. Then during certain times of the year when the sun can get this high in the sky at 30 degrees above the horizon, that is when ultraviolet B appears and it increases. And all of this is like a layering on effect until the sun reaches the high point in the sky. And then there's a decrease, right? The UVB first, then the UVA, then the blue light. And I think it's important to recognize that a lot of it isn't just about, UVB or, UVA. It's the change and fluctuations that we key in on that are very important.
The other UVB is where we make vitamin D, that everyone's like sunlight, vitamin D. You only get UVB in some locations for certain times of the year. And then that UV index has to be actually high enough in order for you to not have to be out there with no clothes on
Indefinitely.
all day long to actually get vitamin D. Because if the UV index is like a 1 or a 2, you literally would have to like be outside naked for like 6 hours in order to make
Yeah.
a decent
And
amount of vitamin D
you
or
probably wouldn't
more.
even, yeah, it depends. You might not even make it at that point too.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, exactly. And then the other wavelengths that I think we talk about a lot, that we key in on a lot, are the red wavelengths of light and the infrared spectrum. And so red is a portion of the visible, the Roy G. Biv, right, of the rainbow. And red light stays, I would say, in general, more constant. Like the light is always very dominant in red and infrared. So the majority of sunlight really falls in this red infrared spectrum. And so that has more consistency throughout the day. And it's the other colors that kind of outcompete it at a certain point of the day. So you'll see, if you take a spectrum analysis of sunlight, you'll see at a certain point of the day that there's more blue, like middle of the afternoon, right? There's more blue. That blue is going to be more dominant than red and infrared, whereas it's the exact opposite first thing in the morning, right? The red and the infrared are super dominant, but they're always there. They're always very much a lot of red and infrared. And in that infrared spectrum, there's also a different range and blend. You have near infrared, which is also called infrared A, mid infrared, infrared B, and far infrared. So again, you also have a spectrum of infrared that is going to change and fluctuate too. Some of that infrared, our body actually feels as heat. So that would be more the mid to far infrared, right? That as we get to that end of the range, our body's feeling that as heat. I don't have a lot of mid to far infrared this time of year when I go outside, because I'm not feeling a ton of heat, but I'm going to have lots of near infrared, and vice versa. Then in the middle of summer, I'm going to have a lot of that mid far infrared, because I'm going to start feeling it as heat. It's going to warm my skin, warm my body. And these are just fluctuating things. These are things that this is light that's found in natural light, sunlight, whether it's cloudy, foggy, right? It's just found in natural light. And it has to do, yes, with the presence of these wavelengths, but also with how they change and fluctuate on a daily and seasonal basis.
Exactly. That's what's so important that I think people miss is like the same light that you're going to get at noon in the middle of winter is going to be completely different than the same light that you're going to get at noon in the middle of summer. And the light outside from sunlight is information, because our hormone levels, our gut microbiome, our thyroid, all of that is supposed to shift seasonally. It's all supposed to change depending on time of day, time of year, and the light that is in the sun, the outdoor light for you, wherever you live on this planet, is giving you the correct signal for where you are. That's why eating seasonally and locally is so helpful to people. And, staying away from the high deuterium, like processed foods, is important if you're looking at overall health. And that's why going outside, getting light, is important for gut health. Circadian rhythms are so important for gut health. Not only is it that we have to heal and repair at night when we sleep, which most people are not doing. Like maybe we should do a whole episode on gut health.
Gut health. Love it. Yeah, for sure.
Writing it down. I'm writing it down.
We're going to forget it. So we have to write this down.
It's on the list. It's on the list of things. We got to do a gut health episode. But like the short answer for gut health, the light signal that's coming into your eyes is crucial, and the darkness at night is crucial for your gut lining to repair. The light is informing your body of what microbiome changes need to happen, hormone changes, all of that stuff. So when people come to you or me and they say, can I just use a sad light box in the morning, to set my circadian rhythm? That's why I say no, because there's so much of the other spectrum missing and the information missing. It's a 10,000 lux, right? It's a 10,000 lux light box. Typically, those are going to be pretty high in blue light. They have
red,
some new,
no near infrared. Yeah, no infrared. Exactly.
Right. And so maybe we can dive into that deeper, but that's also on the other end of the spectrum why I say, no, you can't use a red light therapy panel in replacement for sunrise, because there's no blue. The blue light is what like what you said, is in many ways how our brain gets the information to turn on these specific processes in the body, right?
Absolutely. That's exactly it. That kickstarts the circadian rhythm. And while a red light therapy panel can have some circadian signaling because it's bright, right? Brightness
Right.
also signals time of day.
Right.
It's not necessarily an accurate signal either, because the brightness of a red light therapy panel is usually way brighter than going out at sunrise and what that brightness would be. So these are like nuances. These are things that, we kind of want to throw in, because we get the question a lot of, what's the perfect light bulb to use? Or like you said, can I use a red light therapy panel for sunrise? Or can I use a light box, one of these sad lamps for sunrise to mimic it? And it's like, no, there are rare circumstances where someone may never be able to go outside, from 4 a.m. until 2 p.m., right? Something like that, where I say, maybe we have a way that we can do some signaling syncing with, utilizing a light source plus food plus movement. Like if we can sync some things that signal start of day there, but that's a rare instance. And I want to say, living in Michigan my whole life, and having had seasonal depression and having used a SAD box, and then also doing it the natural way, nothing compares to doing it the natural way compared to the SAD box. The SAD box, maybe like the lamp, it gives you a dopamine hit. It's gonna be stimulating, right? It is gonna be stimulating, but you don't get any of the subtle cueing that syncs your body's processes with the light. So while I felt stimulated in a way, almost like a jolt of caffeine, if you will, I felt stimulated. I wasn't. My adrenal glands were still tanked. My thyroid was tanked. My bowel movements had no rhyme or reason, right? Like, I mean, none of the signals from natural light were being received from that artificial source. And so while it may have helped me with morning energy levels, it did nothing to help kind of organize my physiology around a circadian signal.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing that's like, it's going to give you a huge hit of dopamine. But the thing about cortisol that I keep on talking about on these different hormones is like, it runs in a pattern. Like I'm just releasing today on my YouTube channel a video about cortisol, what everybody's getting wrong about cortisol. Cause I keep on seeing all these influencers out there that are like, you need to lower your cortisol. If you want a snatched jawline and a snatched waist, lower your cortisol. And it's like, well, you don't necessarily
not in the morning. I had flatlined cortisol and was very puffy.
It's not a good idea to lower your like there's nuance in the conversation. And so if you're getting this like huge hit of dopamine and like too high of a hit of cortisol in the morning, that can be as problematic as not having enough. And so that's what I see some of these light boxes creating a dysregulation of cortisol, because again, it's like that amount of blue that's telling your brain make more cortisol. And so if you're like blasting yourself with these light boxes, you're not doing it's not going to be favorable, I think, for your hormones overall.
Right. I agree. Let's also talk. Well, I want to talk about light bulbs in a second, because I think there's also a lot of nuance, and I think that companies are heading in a better direction for sure than just good old, bright blue dominant LEDs. But that being said, there's a conversation that we need to have there. But let's jump to other box type lights, right? So the reason, so you know why we don't necessarily love these SAD boxes, because of what Sarah and I were talking about. I don't feel the same way if a red light therapy panel is utilized appropriately, because as I said before, natural light always contains a significant amount of red and near infrared light. And those are the wavelengths that you find in these panels. And it turns out that those are the wavelengths of light that also are very supportive of mitochondrial function, mitochondrial water and ATP production, really important for the body to make what's called subcellular melatonin, or cell melatonin that stays inside of the cell to clean up damage all day long. And our modern internal environments are lacking in those wavelengths of light. And so to therapeutically utilize a light box containing red and near infrared, like a red light therapy panel, is different, in my opinion, because it very much more so mimics the dominance of red and near infrared that we would be getting from natural light. But I don't think it'd be healthy for that to be your only light source shining in your room all day long, right? That would be equally dysregulating. But utilizing it in a therapeutic fashion, typically about 20 minutes a day during daytime hours, can provide massive benefit for mitochondrial health.
Yeah, Agree. And, people are asking me in my group just now, because some panels have it where you can only have the red light on and then you can only turn the near infrared light. And there's protocols out there that say just use the red or just use the near infrared because red is more for skin health. And near infrared kind of penetrates deeper. I just tell people to use both and not to stress out about it. Do you have any opinion on that? Just to keep it simple.
Yeah, it's generally my recommendation because I think the perfectionist mindset prevents people from actually getting any benefit because the fear, right? I always say that my goal as a clinician is to remove fear from someone's like their plan, their support strategies, because that in and of itself is just very, very healing and supportive. And absolutely, you can utilize both at the same time. Is there some research to indicate that they might scatter each other or outcompete each other, change the absorption in a small capacity? Yes, absolutely there is. But have we utilized both in clinical practice at the same time, both wavelengths at the same time, or typically it's oftentimes 4 wavelengths, 2 of each at the same time, with great effect? Yeah, absolutely. So this is where we could nitpick the details or we could go based on clinical experience. And my clinical experience says someone who utilizes the red light therapy panel regularly for about 20 minutes, even with both of those on at the same time, far outweighs someone who is kind of sporadic at utilizing it. Maybe just the red for my skin or maybe just the near infrared for my gut, so I would say when in doubt, utilize both and just make sure you're applying it as a consistent and well-timed therapeutic session, which would mean ideally not before sunrise, ideally not after sunset.
Yeah. I think the problem that I run into a lot in my membership group and just in general is people are really overthinking a lot of these things. And if you just really ask yourself, can you go outside and just get near infrared? No. Can you go outside and just get red? No. You can get more red at sunrise and sunset. Yes. But there's never any time in the day where you can just get UVB. You can just get like it just doesn't work that way.
Never isolated. Yeah.
No, nature doesn't isolate these things. And when we study these things in laboratories, they're always isolated. And so how do we really like do you really know the long-term effects? We really don't. And so I always ask people, can you go back and really think about how nature does this? And can we bioengineer? Can we biohack nature? To a point, I think that we can do some things to support ourselves, but at the end of the day, no, we really can't.
Right. Absolutely. And we wouldn't need red light therapy panels if we were actually living in accordance with a natural environment. It just wouldn't, it'd be unnecessary. But and the majority of, a lot of us can't. And so I do feel like the red light therapy research and my clinical experience and my personal experience with it is robust enough for me to say these are isolated wavelengths of light that have a therapeutic benefit when applied on a regular basis. So don't overthink it.
Yeah, exactly.
Or, I like these companies are great because they dive in, right? They dive into the weeds and it's great. I love it. But a lot of these companies that sell panels don't work with clients. And so they like to say things like, my panel is better than that person's panel and they're not using it right. And that's not what the research says. And it's like, the research only takes you so far in clinical practice.
Well, exactly. We are talking to people every day, you and I both, that are using these things. And we're like, you sit up here in your office with your research and all your papers. And by the way, a lot of this research and funding is done by companies who are creating these products. So there's always a bias when you're looking at that stuff. You and I talk to people who use these products every single day. We use them every day. We use them therapeutically with people. And so we see, does this research actually hold up? Do people need to do these? This is a 2-minute protocol for this or 5-minute protocol for this. It's interesting. Sure. It's great. It's interesting. But is it practical? And are we seeing it actually, come through on the other side? You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And I also find that, I just think people are more and more starved for these wavelengths, and even the research can't keep up for the change in our environment and the mitochondrial dysfunction that's happening from things like the continuous increase in non-native EMF exposure. And so again, it's not a one-to-one correlation. And so, yeah, I find that I actually have my clients err on the side of more red light therapy. And that's because of the fact, and now I always like with anything, I always like a build-up effect. But build it up. And if a protocol says you quote unquote should only be doing this for 2 minutes with red light therapy, not with the Spurty lamp, don't change the Spurty lamp instructions. If you're using that, we can talk about that. But with red light therapy, right? Like I have clients build up to that 20-minute mark and ask themselves, how does 20 minutes feel? If it feels great, then play around with it. Do you want to do 20 minutes every day? You want to do 20 minutes front and back? Right? Like maybe your body is asking for more because that is such key wavelengths.
Such a deficiency that so many people are experiencing. Because I did a post recently on Instagram about this, and I said red light therapy mistakes, and I basically gave that information. Oh yeah. I got somebody jumped down my throat. A red light therapy expert jumped down and a nice person. I've been asked to be on their podcast, like a really nice person, but he really kind of jumped down my throat of saying, where are you getting this? Like 20 minutes. Like if you look at the research and the data, 20 minutes is too much. And I was like, I'm getting it from clinical experience and talking to like literally thousands of people at this point who are using this as a daily thing. I'm not going by all of these like studies because they're funded and paid for by red light therapy panel companies. And
it goes beyond that too.
Yeah.
It goes beyond that because the clinical outcome, and I'm not going to say a ton on this, but the clinical outcome that they're looking for as too much in a lot of these red light therapy studies is reactive oxygen species production. ROS production, reactive oxygen species, are made when more of them are made when mitochondrial function goes up. So the assumption is that ROS are bad. But what reactive oxygen species are biophotons. They carry light, and light is a signal. And so while we're increasing mitochondrial ROS production, guess what? When we expose our body to the near infrared, we're also making more melatonin to help maybe calm excessive ROS, which isn't taken into consideration, nor is it taken into consideration that reactive oxygen species as biophotons are signals to gene expression in the DNA and signals to the immune system via the cell membrane, meaning it's increasing communication, it's improving communication. So I find people with chronic inflammation, it's a lack of communication. The immune system doesn't have the wherewithal, the knowledge that something needs to be cleared from a cell, right? Or something needs to be healed because the communication isn't getting there. So if we reestablish a burst of reactive oxygen species, that actually can draw the attention of the immune system to say, oh, yeah, we'll heal this, sure. Or tell the gene expression, oh, we got to shift and change, right? The expression here. And so it's just viewed differently through the lens of it being biophotons and not bad. Right. And so I think the problem with a lot of the research is the reactive oxygen species are only considered bad. And so increasing them to a certain threshold, bad. Right. And so if we can't go past this certain amount of time because bad. And that's the exact opposite of what I've seen in clinical practice.
Yeah, I agree. And again, like I always post when I have to post about ROS, like they're not all bad. And then we've got near infrared light that helps our bodies to make that subcellular melatonin, because we always talk about melatonin and it's like the pineal melatonin is what most people are talking about. But our mitochondria can make the subcellular melatonin in response to the near infrared light. And that helps to clean up some of that. And so there's, a little bit of a missing conversation there. And that goes the same thing for getting, UV, when we talk about UVB and the damage that UV rays can induce in the body. Well, if you're studying them in a narrow band, UV lamp in a lab, they're missing the near infrared and red that's going to naturally be out there that the sun is providing. That would help to clean up some of the issues that are created by that UV and UVB, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's exactly what it is. It very much, and just to wrap up, because it's a great segue into UV, but to wrap up the red light talk, I do want to preface that I respect all of these companies that are trying to put out guidelines, because there's a lot of literature to dive into. I just think that the literature is not tracking the right things in order to give us as clinicians the best information. And when as a clinician, I'm more like, keep going, keep using more, see how you feel, right? And
Right.
I have
I heard you say that in your membership group like yesterday. Someone is you're like, you can do a little bit more. You can try a little bit more and see how you feel,
I have a client who utilizes quite a ton of red light therapy, and that is making a huge, huge difference. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, more to the conversation when you have the clinical perspective as well. So, all due respect for
Right.
people who have the research perspective, I think it's important, but we can't. This is another topic, right? We rely way too heavily on research in general.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
not anecdotal evidence, which is what we have. We have anecdotal evidence, right? Anecdotal evidence is poo-pooed in the modern science world, right?
Right.
As okay,
Right.
yeah, that's just an anecdote. We need clinical studies done on this. Like we need research done on this, and it's like, no, that's not what I find beneficial. I maybe look to the research to see what it indicates, but my clinical observation trumps that any day.
Yeah. Well, I've got a great podcast on evolving wellness coming out next week. So this will come out Friday. It'll come out the following Wednesday with Dr. Anthony J, who was a clinical PhD researcher with Mayo Clinic, has authored tons of studies. And we really break down like a lot of the nonsense and BS when it comes to the science, the research, the studies, like the data. Like it's not as like top notch for understanding what's going to work best for you as you think it is. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that people really they're not diving deeper into that. They're just like, well, I just want to see it on a piece of paper. Sorry.
Source,
please. Send me your sources for that. I need a peer review. And he's like, a peer reviewed study is like,
you can pay to get your way through a peer review.
It's your buddies. It's your buddies. He's like, you have to actually ask if you want your study peer reviewed, you have to ask people and they have to say yes. So you have to already know them and they basically have to already be your buddies that you've gone out with for beers after whatever scientific convention. And like, you've like become buddy with these people. So like a peer reviewed study is like this dude's opinion of his study or whatever. And then his 5 friends. And then there's like isn't there another study that basically was shown? I think we talked about this, that like there's a study that basically shows most studies can't be repeated and you can't get the same results.
Yeah, no, there's so much information on research. I'm not a fan of research in many ways. No, it's exactly right. Right. In terms of the peer review, I also am not a fan of that type of peer review process because I know that's exactly what happens, because then that means that outlier studies that go against or contradict what me and my buds have researched all along. Like my research is going to help my buddy fund his research in this. And we want to all, get these same conclusions and blah, blah. That means that these outliers, who I love outliers, outliers are what makes me go, huh, that's interesting. I never expected that. Like I love outliers. And so outliers allow me as a clinician, even it's like to change certain recommendations that I make or give more nuance to recommendations. But in mainstream research, outliers are completely rejected, right? Their research articles are rejected unless you significantly rewrite them to help drive the mainstream narrative. So it's a side. This is a side tangent here, but it's why as clinicians, again, our light recommendations are not just in research. So
right. We are really talking to people on a daily basis who are implementing these things in their daily lives, and we see all sides of things.
Yeah, like you'll never find in the research like us saying, like I say this to my clients all the time in my community. I'm certain you've heard this in my community before too. It's like if you want to try using a red light therapy panel before sunrise, go for it. But if all of a sudden, instead of waking up regularly at 5:30, now you're waking up at 4:30 or 4, it means you've phase shifted. That brightness from the red light therapy panel has shifted your circadian rhythm to think that the day has started earlier than it would happen in your natural environment. That's for me as a clinician, that's an indication, not an ideal time for you to use red light therapy. And or vice versa, right? Like if you're using it before bedtime because after work is the only time you can do it, and now all of a sudden you don't want to fall asleep until midnight, another indication. What about that workout, right? If you need to get that workout in because you love going to the gym at 5 a.m., that's the only time you can, fine. But if all of a sudden you're now not able to sleep in past 3:30, again, you've phase shifted your circadian rhythm artificially early. So these are like things you'll never find in any research that we as clinicians understand based on our conversations with clients.
And same thing with eating, because I get that all the time too. Oh, if I wake up at like 5 a.m, and I don't really want to be awake, but I'm really hungry, should I eat? And I'm like, if you don't want to be awake, I personally would not eat. I would not eat until the time that you actually want to be awake, because eating is another Zeitgeber. It's another like circadian signal secondary to light that will phase shift your wake time. And so there's like nuance with a lot of these questions that you and I get a lot. It's like, I can't just say yes or no. It's like, do you want to be awake? Like how it's just like, there's a lot that goes into the same, like, the light boxes, the red light therapy panels. Some people are fine to use them before sunrise and it doesn't impact them. But again, if you're finding you're waking up earlier and earlier, then I wouldn't do it. I would avoid using it unless this general rule for people, they're like, when should I use a red light therapy panel? When the sun is up. Between sunrise and sunset, like that's ideal. Like end of story. Because there would not be any red or near infrared light after sunset or before sunrise. It's dark. It's not there, right?
Well, right. Yeah. I mean, it's there at dawn and dusk still, but when there's darkness, it's absolutely not there. And so, and so I get what you're saying for sure. And the brightness of it is really another aspect too. Like you wake up at dawn, it's chill, light, smooth, right? There's just very calm. And then you turn on a red light therapy panel, it's a completely different sensation. Yeah, exactly.
And speaking of studies, there are a couple of studies that even show red light that's at a certain brightness can disrupt melatonin production. And so
totally.
We have to talk about, if you're going to like have light bulbs on after dark, like you use a red light, a red light bulb or a bulb that has all the blue taken out of it or incandescent, but ideally you don't have any lights on, maybe a fire
this is a good
candle
point.
light.
Listen, right. This is a great point because people are like, well, what lighting do you use? And listen, this is not ideal either, right? I have to have a closed window. I've talked about the fact that I see little squirrels that just want to jump into my house. But I think that squirrels, baby bunnies, frogs, chipmunks.
At least it's not rats.
At least it's not rats. Okay. We have not had rats. So thank goodness.
Knock on wood.
That I would not. I mean, the other ones I've been able to pick up and like escort out. Though a rat, I don't know. Different. But that being said, this isn't ideal, but this is better because I have a window. It's a closed window, not ideal. But what am I picking up from this window? The natural light, as best as it can come through this modern window glass, is I'm picking up a blend of light and changes in that blend of light all day long. Meaning it's still better than any light bulb ever could mimic because light bulbs never change. I'm not going to get any of that nuance in it. And so my brain can perceive that 2:00 in the afternoon looks way different than it did at 9:00 in the morning. I notice that. And even things like the positioning of the sun and the differences in that, it's very obvious to my signaling. And so I would say, if at all possible, even if it's a closed window, I'm still going to recommend that over any light bulb any day. Now, are there things that we can do to maybe add infrared like you're doing into the environment? Absolutely. Like that's maybe another conversation we can add with this. But in terms of lighting, natural, and if you can open windows and screens, or at least screens, you don't need a bulb then. Set up your workstation as close to an open window as is humanly possible, and you're golden.
That's what I've got right now. We had a lovely YouTube commenter, lovely. It says, does Sarah not believe in blue blockers? She's never wearing them. Well, friend, I've got my window open in front of me. You can't see it, but that's the light source. I don't have a ring light. I've got a open window because I'm in Georgia. So it's not like ridiculously cold. I'm at the 33rd latitude and a fire behind me. So I always, if I'm working, I always am trying to be near a window that I can open and keep a fire, some source of like near infrared behind me or close by, because that again is going to help with that circadian signaling, even though, and I've got Iris software on my computer as well. So it brings down a lot of that blue and the flicker that my brain is going to find a bit stressful. So there's, we have to sometimes use technology. It is part of the deal, but there are things we can do to make it less disruptive on the system for sure.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. And so I hope people can compare and contrast, right? Sarah doesn't wear blue blockers because she's in a much more natural light environment than I am. And while I do mitigate my computer screen, I'm going to be blue light dominant because the modern window glass is blocking the red, the near infrared, and the ultraviolet. And so because of that, I have played around with how my brain feels and my energy levels and my focus and my mood, how I feel when I don't wear these versus when I do. And by far, I feel better because these blocks, they tone down some of that intense blue that really I find beneficial just for my day. But I played around with it, and we all have to kind of figure out what works best for us. There's not one, like you said, there's not one perfect way to do it because there's nuance that we have to bring into this conversation.
Yeah. And just to talk about blue blockers during the day, I know you do this. I don't have to tell you. You really want to take a break to go see natural light as often as you can to get that signal, because if you wear blue blockers all day, you're probably going to end up feeling sleepy. Now those are Viva rays, so they block a little bit less of the blue and the green,
which I like. I like that. Right. Yeah. During the daytime, I like that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. See, my yellow raw optics, I'll wear those. They block more of the blue and the green, but I also end up wearing the yellow raw optics like before sunrise and a little bit after sunset when I still need to move around the house and get stuff done. And it helps me not to, and I have circadian lighting all over the house anyway, where it's like incandescent or red, I have the house set up that way. So we never have overheads on. But with the blue blockers, like there's like nuance to that also, because if you're putting on red blue blockers in the middle of the day, you might get real sleepy from that, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Red and orange blue blockers. We need the blue in the middle of the day to keep us awake, right? Because it tells our body and our brain it's daytime. So we want to make sure that we have some of that blue. And it's interesting, right? Because like, I know like I've got just a handful of like, my quantum mom friends in town, and they're like, and they get it. They're like, it's just so weird because we see you in these podcasts and you're wearing these glasses, but then you're outside at playground supervision and you never have them on. And I'm like, and they're like, we get why, but it's just like, it's like you're two different people, like Superman and Clark Kent, right? And it's like, it's situational. I would never wear these outside during playground supervision at my kids' school versus versus when I'm in this situation where like today I'm, 6 hours with light breaks in front of a screen like this. So I really want to make sure I feel much better when I have these on during my day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When I was on the airplane, I had these on, right? When I was in the airport, right? Like there's definite situations for that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's really quickly, I know, we do this all the time, right? You should, only they heard us off camera too.
I know.
If you, let's talk Spurty because we alluded to it, and then let's go maybe more
tanning
into
beds,
and Spurty, and then we could talk bulbs a little bit. So what about Spurty, right? What about Spurty? Okay, what is a Spurty for people first? What is a Spurty?
It's a UVB. It's a UVB way to get, basically it's like a vitamin D lamp is what people use it for, is to boost up their vitamin D in the winter time, because most people don't have UVB, or if they do, it's not, the index isn't high enough. That UV index that we mentioned earlier is not high enough for your body to actually synthesize D from it.
Right.
So people are always asking, should we use the UVB in the winter? Should we do tanning beds in the winter time? I'm super cautious about this recommendation. I have a video on my YouTube channel about it that goes into this in more depth, but kind of we've already really laid a baseline as to why I think people should be cautious with this. Number one, it's missing the red near infrared. It's missing the other wavelengths of the sun. So you're not getting the protection from potential damage, the subcellular melatonin. You're not getting that. So I always would use a red light panel in conjunction with that, as well as try to go in front of an open window, open the window, look out the window, let your eyes get the signal. Still not going to match. It's still not going to be a strong UV, to match what you're getting on your body. I use them with caution. I haven't used one actually since I was pregnant. And, my son's 16 months. That was the last time I pulled out my lamp. I haven't used it even once since I've been here. I just haven't had time. And I haven't felt called to do it, quite honestly.
Yeah, I feel the same, right? What shifted in me was just this understanding. I don't have any UVB ever in my environment for about 4 months or so, right? At least not UVB that I could utilize to make vitamin D. And then there's a chunk of time where it's just not there at all. And so I thought to myself, why? So it just didn't resonate with me. Like, why would I unnaturally try to inflate my vitamin D levels all winter long using this lamp when I couldn't get that with nature? How is it possible that humans survived, successfully in Arctic regions or higher latitude regions without this artificial device, right? Because we hear, I think the reason why that came about was because we hear vitamin D deficiency.
All the research.
Right.
Yep.
And when I finally found that research on melatonin actually binding to the vitamin D receptor, I realized my job in winter, when I can't make vitamin D from sunlight, is to maximize my melatonin production, utilizing darkness. And so, and also I do supplement in the winter sources of near infrared, like with my red light therapy panel. I find that very beneficial come winter. When I do that, I have zero desire to utilize that Spurty lamp. In fact, I shipped it away to a client who I am testing it on because her environment has UVB and she's using it on one of her children who has some conditions that I think would be interesting to try to benefit from, right? When we're dealing with maybe certain specific conditions, and I don't want to give too much away with this, but there is the potential for people to feel better with elevated vitamin D. That absolutely is a thing. And I would rather a client try to utilize light than a high dose supplement any day. And so, we can play around with it. I have a handful of clients, I would say that particular client, some clients in the Northern Midwest and some clients in Canada, also Sweden, who are utilizing a Spurty lamp and they like it, right? It makes them feel good in the winter, which is fine. They're playing around with it and that's perfectly fine. I, on the other hand, have no desire to do that, to utilize the Spurty lamp. And so again, it's nuance. It's understanding, okay, wait a second, this is not available in my environment. So it is a little bit, confusing maybe to my circadian signaling, but gosh, my body really loves this jolt of an increase of vitamin D 3 times a week, 2 times a week, right, throughout the winter. And so I had them play around with it with all the same precautions that Sarah was talking about, whether it's utilizing a red light therapy panel before or in conjunction and after, but also asking their body how it felt. And so sure, right, again, nuance to it. But in general, I just don't see a need for it if we can maximize our vitamin D levels in the summer.
In the summer.
In the winter.
That's the thing is you have to be doing the work in the summer. You have to be getting those levels up in the summer and getting good exposure in the summer. You don't really want to go into winter super deficient, which most people are. Most people aren't maximizing sun exposure. They're not getting their levels up naturally in the summer, and they are going into the winter very deficient. And so it's a different conversation, but again, there's a safety aspect. If you're not blocking artificial light at night, if you're not waking up and seeing sunrise and UVA and doing all the things to precondition your skin and using it in conjunction with the red light therapy panel, it could potentially be dangerous. And so it's difficult when you have like a large amount of people that you're talking to give that sort of advice. Like people all the time in my comments, please, can I use a tanning bed? I'm like, I'm never going to say, yeah, go ahead. To just like a general question. No, there is like a lot of nuance that goes with the tanning bed and with the vitamin D. And then even then it's still not foolproof, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's
So
just, I want to provide people with information that they can decide for themselves, make
yes.
their own, like ask their body, like get in touch with your body.
Yep.
And if you have a Spurty lamp and you feel like garbage this winter and you've been doing all the circadian stuff and you want to try it, well, then maybe you try it and see how you feel with it. Maybe your body feels, likes the brightness. Maybe your body likes something about, maybe there's some warmth, like maybe your body just feels different when you're using it and you feel a benefit. So you just got to get in touch. But like you said, we can't make these blanket recommendations because it's not that simple. We live in different places on this planet.
Right. That's just like why I can't tell everybody what I eat in a day and they can't expect the same results that I get because I've been working on light and leptin sensitivity for years now. My body is a lot more energy efficient, I think, than most people because I'm working on these things. And what I eat, if you copy it, it's probably not going to work the same for you. And you don't live in the 33rd latitude, like you don't do all the things that I do necessarily. So it's like difficult for me to say, here's what I eat. If you eat what I eat, you're going to just like have the same results that I do because it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's just a little bit different than what people are used to with health influencers because most health influencers found what worked for them. And then they just want to share with the world. I think they're all well-intentioned. It's like, keto worked beautifully for me, or vegan, or this exercise, calories in, calories out. Like this worked great for me. And it's like, they want to just make this for the same for everyone. And there's just too much circadian individuality that doesn't get taken into consideration when it comes to why something might not work for everyone.
Right. And I learned that the hard way, trying to talk about the carnivore diet and the benefits of that, like, trust me when I say my inbox and my DMs blew up with people who were copying exactly what I was doing. And it was a disaster for them. And I couldn't figure it out for the longest time. Like, why is this working so well for me and such a disaster for all these other people? And now it all makes perfect sense. Now the pieces of the puzzle come together so perfectly. And I don't do this like, here's what I do in a day. Here's what I eat in a day. Copy me and you'll feel the same way. You'll feel awesome. Like, cause you might not, you might feel terrible if you eat what I eat,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So yeah, I mean, we want to make this empowering, but also realize that you have to be your own clinician as well. Like you can't outsource all of your stuff to someone else because they're just not in your environment with you.
Right. It's a tough conversation, but
It's tough.
it's empowering because it allows you to just pick up some tools and do some of your own research and then play around with things and say, this didn't work for me, or, oh, wow, that worked great for me. It's a constant, and I'm constantly finding what works and what doesn't work, for myself, for my kids.
Same.
It's life, it's learning.
Different life situations where it's like, okay, now that I'm doing this on a regular, like, all of a sudden I'm coaching basketball a couple nights a week at 7:30 at night. It's like,
oh, Lord.
Okay, this is different, right? What is going to work here? How am I going to make sure I support my circadian signaling with this? And what does my body need? It's like, it's always changing. And if I can check in with my body and say, well, how quickly can I fall asleep doing it this way versus this way, and just kind of figure out what works best. I found something that worked just fine. And so, but what might work for me might not work for someone else, like you said. And so there's nuance, but it's empowering. That was one of the coolest things that someone who's been in my community for, I think a little over a year now, and loves this Quantum Conversations podcast. She was just talking about how grateful she is that she's really, stayed with this circadian and quantum health stuff for a full year, because now she can look back on it and say, wow, this is so empowering. And now I can trust my own intuition so much more. And now I have these tools that I feel like I can work with my family and support their health. It's like the ultimate support strategy. I'm no longer searching for the next protocol or the next guru or whatever it is, right? It's like, I've worked this process. Now I realize what's working. And even as life shifts and changes, she'll have all of this knowledge and these tools for her to be able to continue to tweak the support that her and her family needs. So yeah, it's just cool to hear someone who's been with this for a year or more and what that looks like versus, you know, being in the early stages where you're still kind of playing around with this. It's like, you'll get there. You absolutely will get there. Keep trying it out and checking in with your body. How is your body feeling? Your body is going to send you signals about whether it feels supported versus whether if something is not supporting your healing journey.
100%. Yeah, it's super important to remember that. And I love that story because it just shows like, just keep trying, keep coming, keep doing the things that you might think sound so silly, but they actually are going to make such a big impact.
Totally. Oh, totally. And I think we need to have at the end of this conversation a chat about light bulbs.
Yeah, let's do that. Talk about the light bulbs.
I want to talk about the evolution first. Originally, we went from fire, right? Fire, candlelight, kerosene lamps, right? Flame, heat-based light sources. We've had heat-based light sources for the majority of time. We've had indoor lighting at night. It's been heat-based. And then we went from heat-based in that way to tungsten filament. That's an incandescent bulb. That's another heat-based source of light. And so if you were to look at firelight and incandescent bulbs in what's called a spectrum analysis, like the blend of colors that are present, they look very similar because they're really high in red and near infrared and far infrared. They're really high in the red and infrared, very low, if not, and minimal in the blue range, right? That's the stimulating range at night. So that's why a campfire really hasn't been an issue for people in terms of helping them fall asleep and keep their circadian rhythm. And it's also why, because we all of us had incandescent bulbs growing up, like there was no other option, right? We use those incandescent bulbs. I think the reason why we're seeing such a drastic shift in circadian signaling is we started replacing that incandescent bulb with a white LED. And a white LED bulb, while it's energy efficient, it contains no red, no infrared in any capacity. And it has this huge spike of blue, which is very similar to what it would be like in the middle of the afternoon in terms of the amount of blue, but it looks nothing like sunlight in the middle of the afternoon. It doesn't contain any of the other balancing wavelengths. And that is the bulb that then dominated our indoor environments and our screen technology. So now all of a sudden, right, we have these bright white, which are really blue light LEDs that are illuminating our environment. And that is just, as we've said, we're not going to go into the details, but that is just really chaos inducing for our circadian rhythm, for our mitochondria, for all the things that require timing in the body, which is everything from hormone secretion to thyroid and metabolic function, leptin, you name it, right? So we've talked about that. And now companies are starting to evolve, right? I think light bulb companies are starting to realize, some of them, right, are like, wait a second, oops, okay, these bulbs are energy efficient, but they're not necessarily supportive of human health. And so I think there's some really well-intentioned companies who are trying to make a more balanced light bulb. And I don't want to name any brand names here. But, for example, there are some companies that are at nighttime, a lot of these are because of, babies at night, right? They're nighttime nursery friendly
bulbs. Yeah.
Right. They're LED bulbs that are more amber tone and don't have any of the blue, right? It's like an orangey amber color, so that if all of a sudden baby wakes up and we have to change baby in the middle of the night, it's a soft light, not super bright, and doesn't have the stimulating blue. That's great for that situational use. But that would still be chaos inducing if that was our only light source, because again, it never fluctuates. It doesn't, we're not getting the changing signals. And so I think there are situational uses for light bulbs that can be very beneficial, because these companies are really starting to evolve their thinking about light. And there's some pioneers in this lighting industry who are really starting to work towards a more circadian friendly, human health friendly bulb. For example, some companies are adding in a daytime bulb more colors, so more near infrared. That's great, right? Some companies are adding in, or we have a colleague who loves to utilize a UVA, bulb, right? Like like a reptile bulb, right? Like, in terms of trying to create a more balanced internal light environment. But we have to say, I'm not going to make any recommendations right now, but what I want to say is, while I love the fact that we're kind of having this conversation and we're in this space of exploring light bulbs that aren't just these garbage flicker filled bright blue LEDs, none of them, even if a bulb says it's full spectrum, none of them will ever mimic sunlight, because bulbs won't change. They don't change. And if they do change because of the fact that, let's say, they're connected to some sort of an app or something, they will still, if it's an LED, it will never have ultraviolet light. It will never have enough of the infrared spectrum, that the mid far infrared, even the near infrared spectrum. And so it's still an unnatural source of light. And I don't want to depress people because of that. But what I want to highlight is nothing replaces the sun. And if we can start to wrap our brains around utilizing what we might consider to be our best option for lighting in a given moment, but always recognizing that's not a substitute for checking in with natural light throughout the day whenever we can. It's not a substitute for really trying to go outside at sunrise. And like you said, maybe take a walk on our lunch break to get some good UV light and those changing signals. So I want to applaud some of these companies who are really opening these doors, and we're having these conversations about healthier indoor lighting. But we can't say that this is healthy 100% and utilizing just that, because nothing trumps natural light when it comes to supporting our circadian rhythm and all of the signaling that we get from the light and its changing wavelengths throughout the day and throughout the seasons.
100%. So, moral of the story, try to go outside, try to get the natural light as much as you possibly can. Best is obviously firelight, candlelight if you can at night, but it's not always practical when you have a family, when you have children and spouses that are like, okay, you're crazy. And wear your blue blockers. The blue blockers are going to be really helpful, especially after sunset, before sunrise, in those situations. And
during the day, during the day, if you can use light through a window, that is
window
by
light
far
is best.
ideal.
Way better than light bulbs. That's why I'm always like, even during the day, if someone turns a light on here, I'm flipping it off. We got a ton of windows here, and I'm just like, nope, we're always doing a window, and you can crack it a tiny little bit and the light can get through as well. It doesn't have to be like wide open, like a little crack, it can get through as well.
That can help. Yeah.
Yep. It can. Yeah, exactly. So,
yeah. And so, while I do appreciate bulbs that have like way more balanced blends, and I like where the discussion is headed and where these things are going. It's just, we can't say it's a complete one-to-one replacement. So
yeah, it's not. Nothing is ever going to replace a natural signal. And we all have modern lives, and things that are you've got your coaching and things that are going to prevent us from getting like perfect signals. But there are things we can do to offset that and to support ourselves in those situations. So I look forward to having more conversations about that. That's kind of what the podcast is about, is like, how do we make this doable for the everyday person? So we'll definitely have more conversations about the topic for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.